Welcome to the Big Life Podcast, where dreams aren't just imagined, they're built brick by brick, belief by belief. Hosted by Neal Oates Jr. and Robin Lewis, this show is your invitation to discover your amazing capabilities, invest in your growth, and unleash your potential in ways you've only dreamed of. Join Neal and Robin as they dive deep into stories, insights, and tools designed to inspire you to show up big, live intentionally, and give yourself away for the betterment of those around you. Get ready to rise to what you're truly worthy of. The Big Life starts now.
Hello, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Big Life Podcast. Neal Oates Jr., Robin Lewis. As always, we are here to add to your lives, hopefully to increase your awareness and to bring some thoughts to the forefront of your mind. So, Robin, are you ready for today, sir?
Hello, Neal Oates Jr. Sir, I'm always ready when I get together with you, man.
All right, so let's jump right into it. We have, in our previous shows and episodes, we've worked our way through most of the Big Life acronym. And so today we're going to put that bow on the acronym, but we're not going to put the bow on the show and the podcast and finish. But here's what we're going to do. We're going to talk about the E in today's show, and that is all about evidenced by or through transformation. So would you just share with the audience what that means as we finish up this Big Life acronym, sir?
Yes, sir. Thank you very much. So the E in the Big Life, as Neal just said, the E stands for evidenced. And what we're saying here is that the Big Life is evidenced by the lives that we've touched, by the people that we've helped. And so no matter what you do professionally, you should judge your success. We are suggesting you should judge your success by how much you're able to help others. So we're suggesting that the Big Life is about helping others, adding value, making a difference. A friend of mine, Neal, refers to himself as a hope dealer. And I like that.
Hold on, slow down. Make sure you enunciate and you say that properly, because I don't want people to think that you said dope dealer, because they might be listening and not watching. So would you repeat that one more time, how your friend identifies himself, sir?
I just love it. He's a hope dealer. And the HOPE stands for helping other people every day. So he's a hope dealer, helping other people every day. It's kind of like what you and I do, Neal. Yeah. We're hope dealers, man.
Absolutely,
right?
Absolutely. I love it. Now, real quick, but before we go any further, Robin, you did mention this idea is with the Big Life is that it's evidenced by the lives that we touch, right? So there has to be an evidence, has to be a result, something that we can see as a result of this work that we've put in, and that is not all talk, right? So I immediately think of the people who say that they're health conscious, or they paint this facade that they work out, but then you don't see any evidence of their words. And I think that's so important that as we talk about this Big Life, that from the very beginning, we've made it clear that one, we're on the journey, but number two, that this is a thing of action, that the Big Life is more about doing than saying, talking, learning. And so I just want to make sure that as we even start our conversation today, that there should be evidence. We talk about how the tree is judged by the fruit it bears, not by what the tree says it is or by its leaves, or even where the tree is planted. An orange tree in an apple orchard is not an apple tree. Right. And so I think that's important for us. As I know we walked through some of this framework, you talked about we should have evidence of the lives that we impact. And I think that's going to be a key. So go ahead, brother.
Yeah, it's so true. Also what needs to be pointed out is that there can be other evidence of success or the Big Life in our lives. But what we're honing in on is what we think really matters. And so a part of success is accumulating stuff. Right? But what we're suggesting, the Big Life, the evidence of the Big Life is how much we have added value to people. How have we helped others? You know, in the end, life is about people. Mm-hmm. That's the point. And living the Big Life is about taking care of your people instead of taking care of your career.
Now, Robin, as you say that, I know many times you speak as someone who has gone to the end of the road or gone to the end of the journey, and now you're coming back telling us that here's what life really is about. Right? It's taking care of people, not the career. Life is about, enriching people's lives. It's not about the accumulation of material things. And I know that you have some things that we want to share, but where does that understanding come from? Is it because you've been on the journey and we've been on the journey? Because there are people who are listening and watching us right now who are saying, that sounds great, but I've got bills to pay. That sounds fantastic, but I want that trophy. I want that recognition. I do want that status in my industry or career or even with my family. So while you're talking about taking care of people, that sounds good, but I'm also a person. So I need to take care of myself or gain those tangible physical accolades. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. And I'm going to share a little bit about that. And I also want to add here to that, what I'm sharing is something that I am working towards. And I think, Neal, you feel the same way. And so we
Absolutely.
haven't arrived by any means in that regard. But yes, the more that I look back at my life and I look at others, I look at other people's lives, right? We study other people's life. We consider this thing called life. And it's from that vantage point where I'm coming from that we say we make the statement that it's better to take care of people. And you know what happens, Neal, in the long run, a big part of this evidence is leadership.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to talk about leadership a lot on our show, folks. And so with this one, we can't help but talk about leadership because the evidence that we want that our lives has actually mattered, that we've made a difference, it only happens with and through others. And so the more people that we have on our side is the greater impact that we can make with our lives. And there's only so much that you can do by yourself. And so, yes, it really is about people because there's only so much that you and I, all of us want our lives to matter. All of us want our lives to make a difference, right? To make our lives count. And the only way that that's really going to happen is with and through other people. And so, yes, it's a good question and it's a good point for our listeners to consider. I want to share with you one of our mentors, Mark Cole, who is the CEO of all of John Maxwell's companies, Dr. John Maxwell's companies, as Neal always wants to remind me to give him proper, sometimes I refer to him as John, and
You say,
Neal is like, come
John.
on now, hold
So,
on a second
Robin,
there.
it's not just about giving proper respect and honor, but it's also because I know we talked about this, not making assumptions. When we say John, we know who you are or who we're talking about, but others might say, who is this John fellow?
John.
Like, is he talking about John from the Bible? Is he talking about John, my neighbor down the street? So we just want to know that we're talking about Dr. John Maxwell when we're having these conversations.
And if you remember, Neal, and maybe our listeners heard this episode when you asked me, like who has made, who has been a mentor in my life, Dr. John Maxwell has probably been the most impactful in my life. And so I do find that I refer to him quite a bit. He's written over 100 books, sold 30 million copies, and is recognized as the number one leadership expert in the world. Well, Mark Cole is the CEO of all of John's companies. I think there are 7 or 8 companies that they own. Mark did a and by the way, Neal, I don't mean to be presumptuous by saying this, but you and I hope to have Mark Cole on our show one day. So stay tuned for that, listeners. And what a tremendous blessing that would be if we could make that happen.
Hey, well, since we're so, I know you just threw Mark Cole's name right there. Go ahead and throw one other name in the event that, because we never want to make any assumptions, they might hear Mark Cole and say, okay, well, who else do they want on their show, or that we're hoping to get? There's someone else that we are praying and believing, expecting to have on the show. Go
Well,
ahead.
we're also hoping that to one day have Chris Robinson on this show. Who Chris Robinson is the leader of the coach and speaker arm of the Maxwell Leadership Company. So he is over some 50,000 coaches all around the world. So we're hoping to have Chris Robinson on our show as well. But I don't want to get away from the point. I just figured I would put that in there.
Yeah.
But Mark did a teaching. He did a teaching about John Maxwell's life of compounding interest of people. The number one leadership guru in the world. So it's all about people. He's about adding value to people. And Mark Cole, who's the closest, he's been with the Maxwell organization for about 25 years. He did a lesson. He taught a lesson on the compounding interest of people in regards to John Maxwell. And he taught three things from there I want to just highlight for our listeners today. First, he said, never focus on making money. When he looks at John Maxwell's life and what he's learned and what he's seen. And by the way, one thing I want to mention is that John Maxwell is at the place right now where there are presidents of countries all around the world that have invited him to come to their country to help to bring transformation. There are many leaders in our society, in our country, as well as many countries around the world that credit John Maxwell with being a very influential person in their life. So when we talk about John Maxwell, we're talking about somebody who is extremely been influential, just in case some of our listeners are not aware of that. And so Mark teaches, never focus on making money. Focus on making people. Never focus on starting companies. Focus instead on starting people. Never focus on growing production. Focus on growing people. And this is what the big life is all about. So please understand this to our listeners. And Neal, I know you're gonna ask this. So I'm saying this before you even say it. He's made money. I think he's pretty well to do. You sell 30 million copies of books. He
ain't hurting.
He's one of the highest paid speakers, if not the highest paid speaker that I'm aware of today. Other than president or somebody like that. So he's made money. And understand, he's started companies. I think they have 7 or 8 companies. And understand that they have produced a lot of business. So it's not saying that we're not doing that, but the focus is not there. The focus is on people. The focus is on making people, starting people, and growing people. And so as we talk about this E, Neal, another one of the words that comes to my mind is legacy. Another word we can use is legacy.
Mm-hmm.
And legacy is not leaving something for people. It's leaving something in people. So when we talk about legacy to our listeners, a great distinction there is we're not talking about leaving something for people. Because, that's fleeting. You leave something for somebody that can go. But people always remain, right? That's the one constant that we have in our society. That's another reason why I say it's all about people. The stuff, there's all different types of, jokes made up about that. There's no U-Haul, being pulled, to the grave with the person. They're not taking it with them. So none of that stuff is taken, first of all. And it's all fleeting. It's here one day and it can be gone the next. So when we talk about legacy, we're talking about leaving something in somebody. And this happens over time. But the cool and important thing about legacy, Neal, and we can talk about this for a little while, is that we get to choose it now.
Yeah.
And, I have a question for our listeners for you to consider while you're listening to us today. And thank you for tuning in, by the way. We're so grateful to hear the good response that we've been hearing. And we're so grateful that you take time out to be with us like you are right now. You might be driving, you might be sitting, you might be riding, you might be walking. I'm not sure what you're doing, but I just want you to know that Neal and I really appreciate you tuning in.
Absolutely.
And the comments that you provide. And so a couple of questions that I have for you today to consider is, what do you want your life to stand for? What do you want your life to stand for? What kind of impact do you want to make in this world? That's the question that we get to choose ahead of time. Sometimes when I stop and consider the magnitude of that question and then remind myself that I actually have the opportunity to then go to work to make that happen. It challenges me. And I want to challenge you also. So the E is about evidence. The E is about legacy. And what do you want yours to be? We actually do get to choose it. And it doesn't stop there, but it starts there with the choice. And we've talked a little bit about that in various different topics on our show. But I just want you today to answer that question. And it's something that, it might take you a while to really get that figured out if you don't have it figured out already. And Neal and I want to encourage you to take the time to do that. What do you want your life to stand for? What kind of impact do you want to make in this world?
So,
And
Robin, let me jump in here and say, you said that we get to choose what our legacy is, right? The legacy that we leave behind, that we leave in people. And so it's interesting because many of us, up until we just heard you say that, maybe we've thought that legacy is out of our control. Like it's not something that we can demand. The only people who have legacies are sports stars or movie stars or someone that has made a big political impact, maybe a president or some type of world leader. Or we find ourselves considering legacy at the end of our lives when it is too late and our legacy has already passed its formative years. And now we're just relegated to, well, people know that I am this, this, this. I haven't put any intentionality into it. And I know that we have some upcoming episodes where we'll be talking about intentionality. But when you ask these questions, what do you want your life to stand for, and what kind of impact do you want to make in this world? What would you say to someone who, up until this point, and listening to this episode or watching this show, where they say, well, I've never thought about it, or what I've done so far in my life has not been positive. It's not a legacy that I want to leave. It's not what I want to be known for. It's not the way that I want to be remembered or make people feel. And I know you mentioned that it's not the end, but the beginning. But what would you say to someone who is coming and saying, Neal, Robin, it's too late for me, right? I'm so far down this road that I just have to accept whatever comes to me. Maybe it's because of the way they were brought up or the environment they were in or are in currently. What words do you have for them, Robin?
I say, man, aren't you glad that you're listening to the Big Life Show?
That's a good start right there, right?
I say, stick around. Stick around. We have more good stuff to share as well. And I say that, a little joking, but yes, Neal, the thing about that is not just to say it, right? But it's also to make sure that you've structured your life in such a way that that's what you're doing what it takes to actually bring about that legacy. That's the benefit, my friend, who is listening to me, that maybe have not been thinking about the fact that you are creating a legacy, because all of us do. One way for you to consider this, by the way, is what are people going to say at your funeral? That's a part of your legacy. What are people going to say about you? And I'm not just talking about, oh, he's a nice guy or she's a nice woman or whatever the case might be. I'm talking about what are they going to say about you? Mm-hmm. That comes down to things like, how have you impacted their life? Right? And what difference have you made? And so we're doing it anyway. And so what we're suggesting to that person, what we're suggesting to Robin and Neal ourselves to consider is the more intentional we are about that, the more clarity we have around that and live that out to make it happen, is the better chance we have of actually living the legacy that we want to see. So
Robin, before you continue, you mentioned about what are people going to say about us at our funeral. Before my dad passed in 2008, one of the things that he was always drilling into me, I said, Dad, how do, when you want to be remembered? How do you want people to think of you? He says, son, I want you to understand something. My goal in life is not to be remembered. My goal in life is to be missed. And I was like, well, okay, that sounds good. It sounds like a bumper sticker, but go ahead and give me a little bit more. And that's where my father told me, he said, there are people who are remembered who aren't missed. There are some evil men and women that we remember them, but we don't miss them. However, there are people that we don't know, but they are missed, right? So I think of some of my aunts and uncles who have passed away that now I just miss them. And my dad's goal said that, or he encouraged me. He said, son, your goal when you're no longer here is for people to wish that you were still in the room. And if you can get and make the impact on people's lives where they say, this is pretty awesome, but man, I wish Neal was here. Or you remember that time man, if Neal was here, the environment would be different. And so that has been one of my driving forces in my life, is not to be remembered, it is to be missed, so that I can put something in people, in their hearts, in their lives, so that when I'm no longer in their presence, and that does not mean that I'm no longer on earth, but I want someone to wish I was in the room in Alabama when I'm in Fort Lauderdale. Right? I want someone that's in Atlantic City to say, you remember when Neal was here last year? If he was here right now, this would be a better event, that this would be a different feeling. And so that's what's driving me on a daily basis, every interaction. And so when you talk about growing people and hiring, or just make sure the people part of it, and then we're going to make those other things as a bonus. So my goal is to make sure that I'm missed when I'm not in the room. And so far, it has not failed me. And so I think that when we start finding these little things that have great impacts, that makes it easier to do this thing and to live a big life, where if we just look at the big picture, it might seem too far away.
Like that, Neal. And the beauty of that you're sharing too is, think about that. Your dad's legacy actually lives on through you. That's the power of legacy. That's the power of us choosing what it is that we want, and then living in such a way that we live it out. And so think about that, folks. That was Neal's dad's choice. He wanted to be missed. And now that's his son's choice. He wants to live in such a way that he is missed. That's the beautiful part about legacy. So that carries on now.
Through the people, as you just mentioned, because people are the constant in society.
Exactly. I'm so good. Great example. And, so the things that people say about us tomorrow, so let's say at our funeral then, is based upon how we live today. So how you live today is going to determine whether people are going to miss you or not, right? So it's one thing to want it. The other thing is to then actually live in such a way that people miss you. And so that's what we're saying to you here, is that,
Robin, it's so much easier for me to say it and want it than to actually live it. But you're saying, unless I live it, unless we live it, it's all for nothing.
Yes. And you and I come from the mold, from the cloth, that we're not perfect. And so we're working towards it, folks. And so, I don't want people to put too much pressure on themselves, because we mess up. We might not live like it every day. But the point is, the differentiator is how consistently we are living it, not just saying it. So how consistently, knowing that you're not going to be perfect, we're going to mess up, but how consistently we're living in that manner. And what we're suggesting, the big life is all about, it's about serving, it's about leading, it's about supporting, it's about lifting, it's about adding value to people. And, choosing to leave a legacy means choosing others to lead, to mentor, to pass on your legacy to. Neal's dad passed on his legacy to him. I'm sure he was very intentional about that. So this doesn't happen accidentally. And so that's one of the reasons why I said it's your lucky day that we get to talk about this, because if we just leave it to chance, then we're not going to actually take the time necessary to input, to live, to be an example in what we say and what we do to those who are actually going to be able to see that, so that our legacy can live on. We have to be intentional about that. And so The
So,
question
so
is,
Robin, I know that you talk about intentionality with this. It doesn't just happen.
yeah,
For instance, now I believe there are some questions that we can ask ourselves so that it will be, because you mentioned this is not a perfection thing, and right. And so some of us, we're going to say, well, what does it mean to leave a legacy? Does that mean that I have to do this big, grandiose activity once every now and then? Or is it a daily consistent action or just response to the questions, I believe, that you're going to pose to us now, so that we can have these tools in our toolbox? So I can say, well, you mentioned this word mentoring, right? And pouring into and all of this stuff. Like, well, I'm not mentoring anyone. Well, why would I don't know enough to mentor anyone. Why would someone want to listen to me? Or I'm screwed up so much in the past that I don't think I'm capable of mentoring or worthy of it. So I know there are some questions that you use in this E of the big life, and I would love for you to jump into those if you don't mind, sir.
yes, sir, definitely. And that's so we're talking about the big life, folks. We're talking about, maxing out your potential, maxing out your life. We're talking about being the best that you can be. We're talking about making the most impact that you can make on this world. And that's why I asked those questions for you to even consider. And yes, if we're wanting to do those things, then what we're sharing with you today is things that we have to do, because we can't do it on our own. We can't do it on our own. And so what we're talking about here is how are you living, first of all? How are you living? How are you doing in regards to living out that what you want your legacy to be? And number two, who are you pouring into? And so how are you living, and who are you ensuring that you will live through? So who are you mentoring? Who are you believing in? Who are you inspiring and investing in? Who are you guiding and growing? Who are you leading? So one of the things I want to point out to our listeners, Neal, is that we have another big here in the acronym, and that is, who are you believing in? That's the B. Who are you investing in? That's the I. And who are you guiding and growing? And so the shift is going from me to we. So this evidence, this E in the big life, is helping us to take the shift off of us to others. And we're still living the big life by believing in them and investing in them and giving and guiding and growing them, right? And so a question that I asked myself as I reviewed 2024 is, who did I lead? It's a very good question for us to consider at the end of the year. It's a very good question for us to consider every time we are reviewing, or, whether that be quarterly or monthly or annually, is to answer that question. It's like, Neal, you just said it. Who am I mentoring now? You're saying on behalf of some of our listeners, I have found myself at times in my life where I'm not mentoring anybody. And it's one of those that, as we said earlier, if we're not intentional about it, the chances are sometimes it will just go by and not happen. And so here's the point, the more influence that you develop is the greater the positive impact that you'll be able to make. The more influence that you develop. And how do you develop influence? By adding value to others. So the more that we are adding value to others is the more influence that we will create, experience, and therefore the more impact that we will have.
Now, Robin, I want to make sure that our audience is hearing what you're saying, because we might hear influence and we think influencer, meaning all I've got to do is put a lifestyle out there visually for that has no depth, right? That has no substance to it. And so I know that one of my mom's favorite quotes or sayings is, be the body, not the shadow. Right? Be the body, have some substance, stand. Because what we have right now, when you're talking about influence, you're talking about the body. You're not talking about influencing or an influencer, meaning just the shadow. And I think that's important for us to hear, because if we aren't careful, there are shortcuts to have an appearance of the big life, appearance of evidence, but not having that substance there. And so I know that it's our goal, our purpose, our reason for being here is to make sure that you have something tangible, something concrete. You have substance behind that evidence, behind this life that we believe that all of us are destined and are called to live.
Yes, sir. Right on. And yes, and when we talk about leadership, we say that leadership is influence, nothing more, nothing less. It's not necessarily a position or anything like that. It's about influence. And all of us are leaders, right? We influence our kids, we influence our spouse, we influence our neighbor, we influence if we're trying to get a job, we're influencing. And what we're talking about when we talk about leadership is we're talking about influence, but we're talking about adding value, leading in such a way that you're adding value to people. And so, yes, we'll be talking more about leadership on this show. It's a very important topic. And the better leader that we are is the more impact we're going to have. And so I want to share, Neal, if we have, I know we're getting ready to close here. I want to share a story, if you'd allow me. Do we have a little time for that?
Yes, sir, we do.
So as a teenager, my friends and I, one Sunday evening, tackled some difficult questions. We were standing outside the gate of a friend's home, and it was just getting dark. And we were tackling questions like, if God is real, why does he allow so much suffering? Why does he allow starvation? Why does he allow so much injustice? Why does he allow so much tragedy? Very difficult questions, Neal, to which we did not have the answers. And I remember leaving that conversation that night. As I stepped away, I stopped and I said a little prayer. I said, God, I looked up into the sky, in this beautiful night sky at that point in time, stars and moon. And I said, God, if you made all of this, then surely it must mean that you have the power to reveal yourself and to reveal the truth to me. Mm-hmm. Very simple, innocent little prayer as a teenager. And Neal, he has answered that prayer, by the way. And we can talk more about that as we go along on our show, folks. But here's the part that I want you to hear. Just a few years ago, I was sharing that story with a friend of mine, right in my dining room. And in the middle of that conversation, it hit me that God was still answering my prayer some 35 years later. And what happened was I had heard an excerpt. I had remembered an excerpt from a book that I had read. And I realized that God was still answering my prayer. And I want to share the excerpt with you folks so that we as we wrap up the Big Life acronym, we can make some sense to this and kind of set the stage for where we're going in the future. But here's the excerpt from the book. It says, sometimes I would like to ask God why he allows suffering and pain and injustice when he could do something about it. Well, why don't you ask him? Because I'm afraid that he would ask me the same question. And folks, that's what I want to share. That's where Neal and I want to share with you. See, I believe that God is calling us. He's equipping us. He's expecting us to be the difference that we want to see in this world. He's equipped us with the resources, this great mind that we have, the ability for us to change and grow and live into the potential, this tremendous potential. See, we started out with the B saying to you, listen, we believe in you, and we really do. But more importantly, our Creator believes in us, and he's equipped us, and he's expecting us to be the difference that we want to see. And so we're talking about here, believe in yourselves. We're talking about here, investing in yourself so that you can grow. We're talking about here, giving yourself away so that you can also believe in people and invest in people and guide and grow people so that we can be the difference and make the impact that we want to see in this world. And so that's the Big Life acronym. What we're going to be talking about as we move forward with this podcast is how we can do that. How can we grow? How can we become those people that can literally attack the challenges and the problems that we have in this world? How can we be the people that will actually make a difference? How can we be those people that will actually bring transformation to maybe communities, maybe our communities? And it starts with us first, right? It starts with me. But the bigger picture is that will extend out to my household, to my family, to my community, to my city, to my state, to my country. And if we really get good at this and consistent, we can make a difference all around the world. And so we invite you to come and join us. That's the big life there, Neal. Take us home, my brother.
So, first of all, Robin, as always, every time we get to chat, we had an opportunity to have conversation off camera yesterday. And so this is where I tell the audience that as much as you all enjoy our conversations, I enjoy them more because I get more conversations with Robin than you all do. So this is a little bit of us sharing each other, sharing what we know, what we've learned with the world. And that is our goal, to live a big life, to have evidence of the big life through the lives and the people that we touch. Now, we want you to actively participate in the big life. The best way you can do that is to be sure to share this show on any platform that you're watching, listening to this. Share it with someone that you love, care about, someone that you want to have an impact on. Maybe this is someone that you are mentoring or guiding along. Maybe this episode is the one that sort of flipped that switch and reminded you that you need to be pouring into someone else so that you can leave a legacy that is evidenced by transformation, evidenced by people's lives who are improved. As always, make sure that you leave comments on the show, whatever platform that you're watching us, listening to us. We read every comment. We want to know how we can help you truly live and embody the big life. Make sure that you subscribe to the Big Life Podcast so that you never miss an episode. As you can hopefully tell from today's episode, we're bringing lots of value so that we can help you all be better. Robin and I always want to remind you that we love you, God loves you, and there's nothing you can do about it. And until the next time we see you or you see us, we're for you and we're right there with you. Take care.
Right on.